How's it going, everybody? I've been wanting to do this channel for a while, but haven't really known what to call the channel or anything like that, so wanted to make a first video. I figured what better first video than like a kind of a recap video of 2023. Well, this last year I haven't read very many books, unfortunately. I think I read 16 books in total. A lot of those are audiobooks that I listen to while I'm at work. Just one of those years I didn't really have a lot of time, unfortunately. I also don't think I watched a heck of a lot of movies either. Maybe like 83 movies. I guess that's not too bad. I wanted to watch more though. And I don't know how many of those are rewatches, because I feel like this year was a lot of rewatches for me. But in comparison, I don't know how many movies I watched 2022, but I did read 37 books in 2022. I've been trying to get back into reading a lot more, because I used to be like a huge reader when I was a kid, when I was in high school, middle school and all that. Like around college, there was a lot of burnout anyway, because college. And I only did 3 semesters of college. Started working full-time, and so, a lot of times overtime. Basically, ever since college and into my working life, I started falling asleep every time I wanted to try to read. And so it kind of frustrated me. I finally did start doing audiobooks, and then this last year I've been able to actually read physical stuff again without falling asleep after like 5 minutes, so I'm starting to try to take advantage of that. That's like a within the last couple months thing, so I haven't really read a ton of physical books yet. But hopefully next year, hopefully 2024 is my year, you know what I mean? For this last year, I'm going to talk about books that I read, some of my favorite books. Out of, how many books did I say I read? 16. There was still a few that stuck out. There's a couple of 5-star ones, in my opinion, and some like 4-star, 4.5 stars. I'm going to give you my top 6, just because I just wrote out some of my favorites, and it happened to be 6. I'm like, oh, I could do a top 5, but you know what? I really don't care about like those conventions, and so I'm just going to talk about what I want, what I want to talk about. I would have taken out whatever ones I had physical copy, but they're all just kind of like in storage, and it's kind of a hassle to get out. So maybe if I'm not too lazy, I'll put up a picture on the screen and edit. I'll save my favorite for last. And I guess this is pretty much in order of my where the last will be my favorite and to like the least favorite sort of thing. The only exception being like there's these first 2 are pretty kind of close. First one I'll talk about is The Dark Half by Stephen King. So I'm a huge fan of Stephen King. You guys are going to find that out with this channel if you guys end up watching this channel and following me. Huge fan of Stephen King. I have been since I was in high school, or I might have been in 8th grade when I read my first Stephen King book. So The Dark Half is a really good book. It is based off of Stephen King's, when he had a pseudonym of Richard Bachman, you know, a pen name. And then somebody like found out and confronted him about it. Apparently, like in the real life version of that, the person was like, "Oh, what should I do now that I know that it's you?" And Stephen King's like, "Well, I mean, I guess if you wanted to tell the press or anybody, you know, you might get some fame or money out of it or something like that." So Stephen King kind of gave him that idea, I guess. But in the movie, somebody confronts the main character and he's like, "Oh, I think that you're actually this guy." Because the main character's name I think is Tad Beaumont, and then he's like, "Oh, I think you're actually George Stark. I think you're right under both names." And then instead of letting that guy extort him for money, he just decides to go forward and tell everybody about his pen name under his own volition. And he was actually kind of relieved because he wanted to stop that whole pseudonym thing. But then, like, since it's a Stephen King novel and it's horror, things start getting weird, and turns out maybe he didn't kill that other part of himself after all. I don't really want to get into spoilers, but it was a really good read. It was very gory, and it's funny because I actually watched the George Romero movie before I read the novel, but it had been like a year or so since I'd seen the movie, so I kind of forgot a lot of the beats. I like remembered the general stuff, so I mean I do remember the movie being a really good adaptation. I haven't rewatched the movie since I've read the book, though, for some stupid reason. I really don't know why. The book is definitely one of those you think, okay, this is going to be like a straightforward plot when you're reading it, but then it, like, there's still like, Stephen King knows how to subvert your expectations, even if you think he's not going to be able. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, really good, really gory and violent. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. So, next one is another Stephen King novel. I think 4 out of 6 of these are Stephen King novels, I'll be honest with you. I read a lot of Stephen King this year. I read a lot of Stephen King anyway, but this year was kind of me trying to get through as much of his bibliography as possible. So if you're not a huge fan of Stephen King, I'm sorry, but you know, I fucking love him. So, and it's not just because I grew up in Maine. Like his writing is just so good. Anyway, so Christine by Stephen King is the next one on my list. I really liked this novel. It's another one that was like, I'm not really sure how much I'll like a book about a haunted car. But at the same time, like, at this point, I'm also like, I just trust Stephen King, because there's been so many stories where I'm like, no, how can you make this a good, and then he does. And actually, Stephen King himself had said that Christine started out as a sort of, more of like a funny idea. Like, he wasn't sure if he was going to make it like more of like a parody, or if he was just going to make it like just kind of like a funny, off the wall story. And then as he was writing it, that's when the horror started coming out, and then he started taking it seriously, and then it ended up being, I mean, I wouldn't call it scary. I'm also somebody that's been into horror novels and movies since he was in like almost elementary school probably. So, I mean, there's not a lot of things that I find scary anyway when it comes to that. But I will say there's definitely like a lot of, it's a really good plot, you know what I mean? And there's definitely some messed up stuff that happens. The book itself follows these two high school friends, and one of them ends up seeing, he's kind of like very pimply and voice cracky, and like kind of like the typical nerd of the 1980s, you know what I mean? A lot of people don't like him. The main character is like this, I'm pretty sure he's a football player. He's some sports player, and he's just been friends with this guy since they're little kids. So I mean, he's always like had like a soft spot for him, but like everybody else is like, I hate this guy. I think his name was Arnie, the name of the nerd character. I don't remember what the name of the sports character guy is. It was earlier in the year that I read this novel. So, but Arnie ends up seeing this car for sale, and it's like beating all the shit. And the main character's like, what the fuck are you talking? Why would you want this piece of shit car? And he's just like, oh, it's so beautiful. Like, it's like me. It's ugly on the outside, but it's beautiful on the inside. And then he just gets obsessed with this car, and then it turns out the car may or may not be haunted, sort of thing. So, and it is haunted. That's not a spoiler. It's literally like on the book blurb. But I watched the John Carpenter film after reading it, and John Carpenter film is phenomenal. Definitely changes a few minor things, but that's like, it still is a fantastic adaptation. I mean, John Carpenter is a fantastic director anyway, so I mean, yeah, I highly recommend both of those. Christine, I also gave a 4 out of 5. Christine and The Dark Half, they're kind of more or less tied. I like them about equally, because I like them both a lot for completely different reasons. They're both very like speculative. They both go into like very like unrealistic territories, but it's Stephen King, so it feels realistic. He really knows how to sell it, you know what I mean? Alright, so my next pick is actually the second book of the Dark Tower series, The Drawing of the Three. And so I've only read the first two novels so far. What I was doing, I was originally planning on just reading pretty much all of Stephen King's stuff that I hadn't read before, in chronological order from when like he published them. So the reason why I did that is because there's a lot of his works that are connected through Dark Tower. So I was kind of like, I don't really want to miss out on anything if I don't read certain things while I'm reading those, or read them before I get to their part in the series. I don't know how to explain it, but later in the year I looked up all the novels that are connected through Dark Tower, and then like, because some of them are just lightly, so I kind of also went through and like looked up what the ones that were like absolutely need to read while you're reading the Dark Tower series, or where in the series you should read them, or in the ones that are also like you don't need to, but they're definitely like heavily like connected. So I'm gonna end up just doing that order. Maybe I'll make a video of that if people are interested. That way I don't feel like, I have to do it in order where, like, I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of novels in between the second book and the third book of the series. So it's like, by the time I get to that, I'm going to forget what happened in the last one. Because as it is, once I read The Gunslinger, there was a bunch of other stuff until I got to the second book, and it was kind of like, what happened in the first book again? Which, not a whole lot happens in the first book anyway, so I guess it didn't really matter. And as it is, it's been a little bit since I've read The Drawing of the Three, but I remember a lot of it that happens, because a lot does happen, and it is very memorable. The book is so well written. It's basically like introducing the characters that are going to help out, what's his name, Roland, in his quest to find the Dark Tower. And it is so good. There's like kind of time travel, a lot of fantasy. It's definitely like transporting between worlds, between like possible versions of our real life and then like possible versions of like Stephen King's universe, real life. I don't know how to explain it. It's a lot, but at the same time, and it's never overwhelming. It is fantastic. I really cannot wait to read the rest of the Dark Tower series, because Stephen King is definitely like so good at that whole dark fantasy thing. It is so, like, his world building is amazing, and it's really funny too. In that book, in The Drawing of the Three, kind of goes from like realistic fiction to like very speculative fiction. It is fucking awesome. I love it. So I'm excited for the rest of the series. I don't know when. I'm kind of torn between if I want to read just a bunch of non-Dark Tower Stephen King books before I finish the Dark Tower series, or if I should just get the Dark Tower series over with and then a bunch of other Stephen King, non-Dark Tower Stephen King books. I don't know. Still figuring it out. Right now, I've read so many Stephen King books this year that I'm kind of going through a bit of a break from his stuff and reading some other things. I don't know how long that break will be. So yeah, I gave Drawing of the Three a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Really solid. Really awesome. Alright, so now we're going into 5-star reads of this year. At least 5-star for me. Now this first one probably should not actually be 5 stars. I'll explain. The next book on my list is 4 Past Midnight by Stephen King, which is a compilation of 4 novellas. It's The Langoliers, Secret Window, Secret Garden, The Library Policeman, and The Sundog. I say probably shouldn't be 5 stars because I'll give you the ratings now before I get into each story. The Langoliers to me is a 5 out of 5. Secret Window, Secret Garden I think is a 4 or 4.5 out of 5. The Library Policeman is a 4.5 out of 5. Then The Sundog is easily the weakest one at 3 out of 5. So I mean, especially with that 3 out of 5, you're kind of thinking like, why would it be 5 stars? But at the same time, like, those first 3 are so good, and I still think about them even after I've finished rating them after like a month or two. This is one of the more recent ones, I guess, on the list. I think it was like maybe 2 months ago I read it. And especially The Langoliers is so good. I don't know, I just think for a compilation, I've just found a lot of times, especially with Stephen King, I've only read a few of his short story collections, but I usually find his shorter stuff is very hit or miss for me. Because I've read a lot of Night Shift, Skeleton Crew, Different Seasons. I've read another one. Different Seasons is another one of 4 novellas, and then Skeleton Crew is like a lot of different short stories. A lot of Stephen King's shorter stuff tend to be really hit or miss for me versus his novels, which almost always hit. And so I'm just really impressed with 4 Past Midnight, how I enjoyed all 4 of the novellas. And while I did give The Sundog a 3 out of 5, here, let me just go through each novella one by one. So it comes off of the gate with The Langoliers, which might be also the longest novella. I think it's definitely a weird choice that they put that in the first section, the very first one that you crack open the book to. In my opinion, that should have been the last, or maybe the second to last one. Maybe I'm thinking that just because I thought it was the best one, but I don't know. Apparently some people don't really like it that much, but it starts off during a flight, and all the characters wake up to find that almost the entire crew, besides like 10 or so of them, have gone missing. In midair, when they look out the window, it looks like none of the electricity throughout the entirety of the United States is working. So they're trying to figure out what the frick happened. And it kind of goes into like post-apocalyptic territories. Like they end up coming down to like an airport, and there's like they're trying to figure out what the fuck just happened. Like there's nobody there either, and the way Stephen King kind of like explains certain things about this world that kind of make it, I don't want to call it world building because it's not really, I guess it's not really like a different world, but like he paints the scenario that had happened, the post-apocalyptic scenario, like so well, and explains it bit by bit, and all the characters are just fantastically written. Even like the characters that you don't want to root for, they're just so well written, and they're like, even like the villain characters have so much like so many human qualities to them, you know what I mean? They have their flaws, but they also have like their kind of redeeming qualities. I was hooked the entire time. I fucking loved it. I actually wished it was a longer work. But it kind of like takes The Stand and The Mist and kind of like melts them together in a way. And that's how like the post-apocalyptic feel is in my opinion. It's such an interesting concept that he does for like what it is that made everything happen. It is so good. I love it so much. I give it a 5 out of 5. I love it. The movie though, when I was watching the movie, because it was a made-for-TV like miniseries, I think of like 2 episodes, like a 3-hour-long movie if you watch it as a movie. And I'm sitting there thinking like, why does everybody shit on this? Because like, this is actually really good. And then like, I think it's like a little bit over halfway, like the really bad special effects rear its ugly head, and you're like, oh. One of those things where the movie people try to like show something that shouldn't be shown, because I don't even think it's even shown in the novella. That's really vague without telling you what it is, because I don't want to give any spoilers, but read the novella. It's so good. So after that, Secret Window, Secret Garden is the next novella. So a lot of people compare that to The Dark Half, and they are kind of similar because they're both about writers, and they're both based off of stuff that happened to Stephen King, whereas The Dark Half is about his pseudonym, Richard Bachman. Secret Window, Secret Garden was actually mainly about when he had his home broken into while him and his wife were asleep, and there was like a crazed fan that was yelling. He claimed to have like a homemade bomb, which ended up being fake. He was yelling at Stephen King, telling him that he had stolen the manuscript for Misery from either him or like somebody that he knew. It might have been like a family member of that guy's that he was claiming wrote the manuscript for Misery. That coupled with there have been other times where like people have unfoundedly accused Stephen King for plagiarism, which isn't something that has just happened to Stephen King. Every single author that gets big enough and famous enough or well known enough has had that, you know what I mean? Because you get either people that are lying just to try to get like an easy suitcase, what they think is easy, or you get people that are stupid and don't seem to realize that like not every single idea, especially now, like nowadays, you're not ever going to come up with a completely original idea. You take aspects of a bunch of different things and then create a whole new product out of other things, but you're not gonna come up with a trope that actually works, that has never been done before. Yeah, so Secret Window, Secret Garden, it's about the main character, like, his name is like Mort, or Morton, and this guy shows up and he's like, you stole my story. And he's like claiming that one of the main character's short stories was already written by like this other guy, and then at the same time that main character is going through a divorce because his wife had cheated on him, sort of thing. And this main character is like a well-known, well-established author. I don't know how much more I can really say without potentially spoiling stuff, because like, and it ends up not just being about this guy wanting to get revenge on the main character for stealing his story. And there's like some plot twists, and there's some subplots that like kind of thicken the plot. It is really good. This was another one that I had watched the movie beforehand, but I watched the movie back when I was in like high school. And I remember most of the movie. I couldn't remember exactly how it ended though. I remembered like basically like the concept of how it ended though, but just like with The Dark Half, I haven't rewatched the movie since finishing the novella for some stupid reason. But I do remember absolutely loving the movie, and if I remember the movie enough, having read the novella, I'm pretty sure it's a really good adaptation. I don't remember. Maybe I'll do like a video. I'll rewatch both of those and then kind of give my thoughts of how well of an adaptation they are. So like Secret Window, Secret Garden was very solid. I loved how it ended. Next is Library Policeman, which kind of like Christine. I shouldn't say that. I was going to say like Christine, I didn't think I was going to really like it because of the premise, but Christine, I thought I was going to like it. It was one of those things like, I don't know how he's going to do it, but I trust him. And I should have had that same feeling with The Library Policeman, but the thing is, like, the way it started out, I'm like, oh, you know, this is going to go in this direction, or this is going to go, like, you know, more straightforward sort of thing. Because there have been other stories, like in Skeleton Crew, that I feel like had that beginning that I was like, oh, it's going to go like this, and it did. So I was expecting that with this one. Like I said, his shorter stuff just tends to, for me, just be hit or miss. So I guess I was like, yeah, we had two huge hits. Now it's going to be the miss, you know what I mean? But it was one of those things, like, after a little bit, something happens, you're like, oh, I did not expect that. After a little bit, something else happens. Oh, I did not expect that. And something else happens. Like, what? This is not the same fucking story that I started with, you know what I mean? But, and even like, yeah, like the Stephen King, this was another one where, like Christine, he was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make this a serious thing. This might just be like a joke story or parody or something like that. And, because he got this idea from when he was having breakfast with his son, Owen, and when Owen was a kid. I don't know how old he was, but apparently Owen was, like, old enough, because he was like, yeah, I need you to pick up a book for me for, like, this book project. And Stephen King's like, oh, why don't you head to the library? And Owen apparently was just like, oh, I don't really want to go to the library. You know, like, kind of, like, mumbling under his breath, and Stephen King's like, what did you just say? He's like, I said I'm afraid of the library policeman, but I know he's not real. Like, I don't actually believe that he's going to come to get me. I just don't want to risk it. You know, one of those things. Like, old enough to know that that's BS, but not old enough to not be afraid of it. And then Stephen King apparently was like, you know, when I was a kid, I was also afraid of the library policeman. I feel like there's a story in that. And then after a while, he's just like, all right, I'm going to start typing this out. This is going to be like a funny joke thing. And then, like, apparently as he was writing, childhood fears started kind of like coming up to the surface, like childhood fears that he'd kind of forgotten about. And he's like, oh, nope, I'm going to fuck people up with this one. So, fair warning to anybody who wants to check out the story. It is a bit of a spoiler, but at the same time, certain people will not want to read this book because of it, but it does have some, like, SA in it, you know, like, sexual assault. I say some, it's actually pretty graphic, like, at some points. So if that is something that you cannot do, this is not the book for you, unfortunately, because it is a really good novella. It's like, yeah, like, definitely, like, if you can read that, like, it is might be a little bit of a spoiler, and I am sorry, but like I said, like, I definitely want to put that out there. I definitely don't want anybody going in blind, and then that happens, and if that's something they really can't, you know, handle, which I would, like, completely understand, you know what I mean? Because as it was even me, there was, like, a scene that I was super uncomfortable with. It is, very graphic, very explicit, definitely detrimental to the plot. So, like I said, it is one of those things. From the beginning of the story, I was kind of wondering, like, oof, is that going to happen? So maybe some people will have already figured it out anyway, just from naturally reading it beforehand. But other than that, the only thing that kind of makes me not give it a 5 out of 5 stars is because of, like, certain characters' reactions after those related things come to light. I don't think it's very realistic. That is very vague, not being able to give spoilers, but if anybody reads it, you probably know what I'm talking about. But other than that, like it is so well written. Everything, like all the plot twists, like come naturally and throw you for a loop. It is about a library policeman who's coming after you for having overdue books. Sounds ridiculous, but it's also like mixed with some psychological horror, some body horror, and just really good characters. Like I don't know how the fuck Stephen King writes some of the shit that he writes, because it's like I don't know how anybody can come up with all of this, and have it all be in one thing and have it be coherent. But goddamn, do you not only not make it coherent, but you make it frightening, you make it so interesting, you make it so goddamn good. It blew my mind. Like I said, it would be a 5 out of 5 stars. There's just like one really glaring flaw, and I'm sure it's just because Stephen King's never been in that situation himself, so he doesn't know how somebody would react. And then the last story is The Sundog. It's a good story. I will say that. It's just what I thought The Library Policeman was going to be, like super straightforward. That's what The Sundog ended up being. It kind of feels like an adult Goosebumps book, which is actually pretty fucking awesome. Like, I'm not going to lie. It's like a really messed up version of Say Cheese and Die. But yeah, it's like some kid wants a Polaroid for Christmas, or some gift-giving holiday. I think it's Christmas. And he gets the Polaroid that he wants, except every time he takes a picture, the only thing that comes out is a picture of this mangy mutt in like this indistinct backyard, or not indistinct, but like an unfamiliar backyard. And like at first I think it's the exact same picture, but then they find out the picture is actually technically slightly different each time. And he ends up going to like this guy who owns like an antique pawn shop place or something like that. And the guy's a fucking greedy asshole. So he's like, "Oh, I'll help you out." It's predictable. I feel like maybe somebody out there will read it and they thought it wasn't as predictable. But it's one of those things too. I think Stephen King might have been the one to say, or maybe he was quoting somebody else, because I know like other authors have also said it. But a good author is somebody who can tell you a story that you might know how it ends, but they're still happy to hear how you tell it yourself. You know what I mean? Like an author can take a predictable story and yet still make it entertaining and worth the read. You know what I mean? Even if it ends the way that you think it's going to end. So this is definitely a perfect example. And that's why I give it a 3 out of 5, because to me 3 is still good. I don't know if I should go over my rating, like how I do my ratings now. 1 star is bad, 2 stars is okay, 3 stars is good, 4 stars is great, 5 stars is like, this is fucking, and then like, half stars in between to kind of like, because sometimes book is okay, but it's almost good, so you want to give it a 2.5. You know what I mean? It's not just okay. Yeah, 3 to me is solid. Might have its flaws, and that's definitely like Sundog. Like, characters are great. The way it's written is great. It's just that I kind of wish that the story had some more pizzazz to it. That's why I think that's the weakest one. And it still is good, and it doesn't detract from how fucking amazing the other 3 novellas are. So for the whole compilation of 4 Past Midnight, 5 out of 5 stars. It is, probably as near perfect of a compilation of novellas like that you could probably get to. So that's my thought process on it. Maybe down the line I'll read some other novella collections that are like, oh, no, 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 no. I guess they could have put in another banger, you know. Maybe I'll knock down 4 Past Midnight to like a 4.5 stars. I don't know. And also, like, just my own personal enjoyment. I loved it. So, I think it warrants 5 stars for now, at least. Alright, next book. Guess what? It's actually not Stephen King this time. And I think this is the first time I read this author. I've been screaming this book from the rooftops, like, recommending it. Like, I love it this much. And some of my friends that I've been telling to, they're like, oh, actually, I know that author. And, you know, have said that he's made a lot of, like, fantastic books. So I definitely got to check out more of his shit. But, yeah, so this one is called The Only One Left by Riley Sager, or Sager. I don't know how to pronounce the last name. I should know, because I listened to the audiobook and they said it like 14,000 times in the beginning. Not that many, it was like only like probably 3. But apparently that's a pen name though, so I guess I don't really feel like I'm completely insulting the guy, I guess. But anyway, The Only One Left. It's one of those things, I actually saw the cover when I was in Walmart one time, and I thought it looked cool, and I'm like, oh, cool, you know. And, like, you know, I was about to, like, walk away without even looking more at it, because it's like, I got so many books that I want to read, I don't really need any more. And then I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll just check out what it's about. And then, like, I read what it was about, and I'm like, that actually sounds fucking awesome. Well, I don't know if I really want to buy the book right now. Maybe I'll look it up later on Goodreads or Storygraph or something like that. So I took a picture of it. And later on, I did look it up, and it had, like, really good reviews. I think, like, on Goodreads, it's like a 4 point something. Maybe like a 4.06, maybe it's like a 4.10 or something like that. But it was like, okay. Apparently people are loving this, and it sounds awesome. I think I'm going to buy the audiobook and listen to it while I'm at work. And holy shit. Right off the gate, this book is so damn good. Like, it starts off with like impeccable writing. It really grabs you. There's like a plot twist like within the first chapter or so. Like, it already is slapping your face with like, oh, you think it's going this way? Boom! No, it's not. It's going this way. Oh, you think it's going that way? Oh, bam! You know what I mean? It's basically, it's a gothic murder mystery. Basically, it kind of goes into like horror elements. But I'd probably call it more like thriller suspense. But yeah, like the premise is that or let me finish my thought. It's a gothic murder mystery, except the murder had happened like 54 years or something like that before the events of the novel. You know what I mean? It's not like they're trying to figure out this murder that just happened. It's like characters finding out more about like something that happened in the past that like really shook this town. And so the premise is that there's this caretaker, basically like a house nurse, who her job is to, like, she has a client. She usually lives with them, and they're usually clients that are like older and have like really really bad conditions. And like the point is, like, she takes care of them until her services are no longer needed. In other words, till the client is and like her thing is to try to keep them as healthy as possible and as comfortable as possible during that time. And she gets this new client. It's this older woman who's had like some strokes in the past and had polio when she was younger, so she can't speak and she can't move her legs, so she's in a wheelchair. And she also, the only limb that she can really actually move is part of her left hand, I want to say. So, like, she kind of communicates by, like, tapping twice for yes and once for no. You can really only ask her, like, yes or no questions. Except when the caretaker, like, starts taking care of this person, she is informed that this is, I want to say Lenora. Maybe it is Lenora. She is suspected of killing her entire family 54 years ago, or 50-something years ago. Like her mom and dad and her sister. But it was never proven. When the caretaker starts taking care of this person, she ends up finding out that, like, she can actually type on a typewriter a little bit with her left hand. And like this takes place in the 80s, I'm pretty sure, the early 80s. So then like she like helps her like over to the typewriter, and she like helps her start typing stuff, and like she's like, I want to tell you everything. I want to tell you exactly what happened that night, you know, because I'm sure that you want to know if I did it or not, sort of thing, you know. And it's like, and because she can only type with her left hand, which is her non-dominant hand, it takes her a long time to type. So like it's this whole process, and it's like, it's so good. I don't want to say any more than that. And like that's pretty much the whole premise anyway. I think that's pretty much all the book blurb like told me that made me want to go read it. So if that doesn't make you want to go read it, I don't know what's wrong with you. But fucking read it. Like, I don't care who you are. It is such a good novel. And it's so well written, and the plot twists. There's so many plot twists, and it's not one of those things where like you feel like, oh, he's just putting in plot twists just to put in plot twists. No, like they feel like they fit the story so well, and the way he introduces them is like nice and natural, and it doesn't feel like he's beating you over the head with it. It doesn't ever feel like he's giving you too much information at one time, and in fact, like the pacing is perfect. Like oh my god, it was so goddamn good. So that's a lot. I don't know what more I could say. Like, it was 5 out of 5. Like, as soon as I finished that, like, that is no less than 5 out of 5 stars, man. That is so good. I'm so glad that I, like, discovered that, like, on a fucking chance. And I'm really excited to try out his other stuff. That came out this year, and that's a 2023 novel. Now, on to my favorite book that I read this last year. And you're thinking, with that, him talking about that book with that much enthusiasm, that wasn't his favorite book? No, it wasn't. And it's a little bit complicated, because when I first read it, I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. And even then I was kind of like on the fence if I wanted to give it 4 or 4.5, you know what I mean? It was really good, really solid. But it's one of those books for me personally, like, I dwelled on it, I'm still thinking about it, and I read this early this year. Like, it was within the first few months, and I'm still thinking about this novel, and I'm still thinking about the characters, still thinking about what happened, and also the thing for me personally. I had just gotten past, like, this weird messed up time in my life, right? And some of those things, like, it had to do with, you know, relationship stuff and things like that. And there's a lot of stuff in this novel that either felt like almost like parallels to some of the stuff that I was going through, or had just gone through, or it felt like that it fit in some way. I don't really know how to explain it too well without just going into my entire, like, the history of that whole thing in my life. And, you know, I don't want to bore you guys either, but basically, this next book, it's not by Stephen King, but it is by his son Joe Hill. It's called Horns. I want to say, if you have watched the movie's alright. It's a good movie. They changed so much, though, and they changed, like, some of the things that make the book so good for seemingly no reason. So if you've seen the movie but haven't read the book, I'm telling you right now, you need to read the fucking book. Yeah, Horns by Joe Hill. It was so cathartic at that time for me to read that book. And it was one of those things I didn't even pick up the book and like go like, oh, this seemed like this is gonna like help me out. It was one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, this has been on my to read list for a while, and you know, I've been wanting to read more Joe Hill, because I think before that I had because I think I've only read 2 novels of his so far anyway, and so before Horns I had read Nosferatu, which was also fantastic, but I definitely like Horns more, which, like, maybe like objectively Nosferatu might be like a better overall story. Like, it's definitely like really good and like really kind of vast, I guess. But like I said, Horns for me, I just have this personal relationship with it, and like the more that I've thought about it over the year, the more I'm just like, that was such an essential read for me during this time of my life. And it doesn't help, or it doesn't hurt, I guess, that it was just already like a fantastic novel anyway. So the premise of it is this guy wakes up and discovers he's got horns on his head, like he's turning into the devil or something like that. And then he finds out that people really all of a sudden want to tell him their deepest and darkest sins. And shit like that. And so he ends up finding all this stuff about a lot of people he knows that he does not want to know. And also throughout this, he's already going through the fact that his girlfriend had been killed in like a really gruesome sex-based murder. And everybody thinks that he did it. And yet he didn't at all. And he wants to find out who did do it, because he was like madly in love with this girl. He wanted to marry her. And it's one of those things where, like, it's one of those novels, you start off, and it kind of, like, puts you in the middle of all this, right? And then you're like, okay, so we don't know what happened to his girlfriend, but we know it was messed up. We know that everybody thinks it was him for some weird reason. You know what I mean? And then things just start piecing together, especially once he starts talking to people with his horns, and he's finding out more about it. And it is like beautifully paced, beautifully written. Characters are all so good. There's some really funny interactions too, like darkly funny interactions that he has because of his horns. So like there's like this dark humor to it. I'm all for that. But then it's also like really heartfelt, really emotional at times. You kind of, near the end of it, you're like, you really like yearn for, you know, that main character. Like you really wish that like he could have still been with that girl, and that they could have been still together, and they could have, you know, had this nice romance forever. A horror novel that makes you feel shit, you know what I mean? Like it is so heartbreaking. Like, and it didn't just make me feel like all those emotions and stuff like that just because of the stuff I went through. I definitely would have felt that anyway, because it was just so well written. Like, I don't want to say I was like sitting there going, oh my god, you know what I mean? It definitely wasn't like that, but I don't know, like I said, and like for me personally, there was like a lot of stuff in it that felt like catharsis for me. There's a lot of stuff in it that kind of felt like it actually kind of helped me work through some of my own thoughts on things, because like reading things from like different characters' perspectives of certain situations that felt kind of similar to like some things I went through, I guess. Like maybe like look at things at a different perspective, you know what I mean? Like I don't know how to explain it very well. And also, as vague as it is, since there's a lot of really fucked up stuff that happens in the book, people might be getting the wrong idea. There was nothing like gruesome that happened in my life, you know what I mean? But fantastic book, and just happened to be at the right time of my life personally. So that might be a little bit disappointing after I had that whole like, you gotta read The Only One Left by Riley Sager, and then like I'm just like, this one it was just perfect for me at that time, you know what I mean? But that's why it's my favorite book that I read this year. Like even if I didn't go through that stuff, that still might have been my favorite, because like there was still so much about it that made me keep thinking. Like I loved the concept of the horns and everything else. And like how Joe Hill intertwines certain things. It's not like there was a lot of stories that intertwine, but there's definitely like some recurring like themes and stuff. And it, oh my god. Like the treehouse. I'm just saying. Some things in the book you think are like, oh, that's just like a detail for this scene. It ends up being like an actually like important detail. Which actually, that's another thing about The Only One Left. The attention to detail in that book is so fucking good. There are some details that like you totally gloss over because you think, oh, it's just describing this. And it's like, that came back. And it was important. You know what I mean? Oh, God. Both of those novels, fucking love. And I want to recommend to everybody. You know what I mean? But, yeah. So those are my 6 favorite books that I read / listen to, because a lot of these I probably listened to on audiobook this year of 2023. So hoping to read a lot more next year, and I'll probably record another video right after this where I talk about a lot of my favorite movies. I really hope anybody out there does check out these novels. Hope you guys had a happy holiday. I don't know when the fuck this is coming out. I'm recording this the 28th of December of 2023. and I still need to think of a channel name and shit like that, so hopefully if I get this out later, it's still fairly in the beginning of the year, so it still makes sense to be talking about 2023. But yeah, thank you for watching my video. Hope you enjoyed.